The restaurant was the kind of place where silence cost more than noise. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan's financial district, and the air carried the scent of truffle oil and old money. Dr. Alexander Whitmore sat at a corner table, his charcoal suit tailored to perfection, reviewing quarterly projections on his tablet, while his assistant hovered nearby with additional reports. At 32, he was the youngest CEO in Chen-Meridian Pharma's history, and he wore that distinction like armor. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost declined, but something made him hesitate. Alexander swiped to answer, lifting the device to his ear without looking up from his projections. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Alexander Whitmore. His voice carried the efficient clip of someone who measured time in millions. The pause on the other end stretched long enough that he nearly hung up. Then came a voice he hadn't heard in 5 years. One that still lived in the corners of his memory he tried not to visit. Alexander. It's Emma. His fingers stopped moving across the tablet screen. The restaurant's ambient noise faded to white static. Emma Laurent. The woman who'd walked out of his life without explanation, without warning, leaving only questions and a gnawing sense of failure he'd buried under promotions and board meetings. Emma. He said her name like he was testing whether it still fit in his mouth. His assistant glanced over, sensing the shift in his demeanor, but Alexander waved her away with a sharp gesture. I need you to listen, Emma continued, her voice stripped of emotion, clinical almost. I have a daughter. Her name is Lily. She's 4 years old, and she's dying. Alexander's world tilted sideways. The tablet slipped from his grip, clattering against the white tablecloth. Around him, other diners continued their meals, oblivious to the detonation happening at table 12. What are you? She has a rare genetic blood disorder. Acute myeloid leukemia with complications. She needs a bone marrow transplant from a biological parent. Emma's words came rapid fire, like she'd rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times. I'm not a match. You're her father, Alexander. And you're her only chance. The restaurant spun. Alexander gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles whitening. 4 years old. The timeline crashed through his mind like a freight train. 5 years since Emma disappeared. 9 months. Math he'd been too willfully blind to do. You're lying. The words came automatically, defensive walls slamming into place. This is some kind of Mount Sinai Hospital, pediatric oncology ward. Room 437. Emma's voice cracked for the first time, a hairline fracture in her control. We're here until you decide whether your daughter lives or dies. The line went dead. Alexander sat frozen, phone still pressed to his ear, listening to silence. His assistant approached cautiously, her expression concerned. He could see her lips moving, asking if everything was okay, but he couldn't hear her over the roaring in his ears. A daughter. His daughter. Dying. Across the city, in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and fear, Emma Laurent sat beside a small bed where a child slept fitfully. Lily's dark hair, so much like Alexander's, peeked out from beneath a colorful medical headscarf covered in cartoon butterflies. Her small chest rose and fell with labored breaths, and monitors beeped a steady rhythm that Emma had memorized weeks ago. Emma's hands trembled as she ended the call. She'd imagined that conversation countless times, rehearsed every word, but nothing had prepared her for actually hearing his voice again. The voice that had once whispered promises in dark rooms, that had laughed at her terrible jokes, that had said, I love you, 3 days before she discovered both his unborn child and his company's deadly secrets. She looked down at Lily, at the 4-line taped to her tiny arm, at the bruises blooming purple beneath translucent skin. 5 years of running. 5 years of keeping her daughter safe from corporate machines that devoured inconvenient truths. 5 years of telling herself that hiding was protection, not cowardice. But genetic disorders didn't care about corporate corruption or maternal fear. They just killed, slowly and efficiently, until someone stopped them. Emma reached out and smoothed Lily's headscarf, her fingers gentle against fabric that covered the hair loss from preliminary chemotherapy. He'll come, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring her daughter or herself. He has to come. Through the hospital window, the city glittered with evening lights. Somewhere out there, Alexander Whitmore was processing information that would shatter his carefully constructed world. Emma knew that feeling intimately. She'd lived it 5 years ago when she'd opened those files, when she'd seen 17 names attached to deaths that Chen-Meridian had buried deeper than graves. Her phone sat silent on the bedside table. She'd blocked his number years ago, erased every digital footprint, become someone else entirely. But desperation had brought her back to her real name, to this hospital, to the one choice she'd sworn she'd never make. Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. They were Alexander's eyes, dark and intelligent, too knowing for a 4-year-old who'd spent half her short life in and out of hospitals. Mama. Her voice was small, tired. Did you call him? Emma's throat tightened. Yes, baby. I called him. Is he coming? I don't know. Honesty was the only currency Emma had left. I hope so. Lily nodded slowly, as if this answer made perfect sense in her world where adults constantly failed to give straight answers. Okay. Her eyes drifted closed again, exhaustion claiming her quickly. Emma sat back in the uncomfortable hospital chair she'd occupied for 3 days straight, watching her daughter sleep and wondering if Alexander Whitmore was capable of becoming the person she needed him to be. The man she'd known 5 years ago had been brilliant, driven, and devastatingly charming. He'd also been blind to the rot in his own company, too focused on innovation and profit margins to see the bodies stacking up in unmarked graves. But people changed. She'd changed, transformed by necessity from an idealistic researcher into a woman who knew how to disappear, how to forge documents, how to work 3 jobs under false names, while keeping a child fed and safe. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maybe Alexander had changed too. Maybe the man who'd received that phone call would be different from the one who'd let her slip away without fighting to find her. Or maybe not. Maybe he'd ignore her completely, write this off as a scam or a manipulation. Maybe he'd send lawyers instead of showing up himself. Emma closed her eyes and prayed to God she'd stopped believing in years ago. Not for herself, never for herself, but for the child sleeping in that hospital bed. The child who'd asked about her father every birthday, every Christmas, every quiet moment when she thought her mother wasn't paying attention. Lily deserved more than this. She deserved a father who showed up. She deserved a life longer than 4 years and counting down. She deserved a miracle. And Emma Loran, who'd learned the hard way that miracles were just lies wrapped in hope, had done the only thing left. She'd called the man who'd broken her heart and asked him to save their daughter's life. Now she waited. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. The city lights glowed through hospital windows. And somewhere between the restaurant and the hospital, Alexander Whitmore made a choice that would change everything. He canceled his afternoon meetings and drove north through traffic that felt like it was conspiring to slow him down. He told no one where he was going. Not his assistant, not his fiancée Elena, not the board members expecting him at a 4 o'clock presentation. He just drove, hands gripping the steering wheel, mind racing faster than the car cutting through Manhattan streets. A daughter. His daughter. The words repeated like a mantra, like an accusation, like a prayer he didn't know how to finish. Mount Sinai's pediatric wing rose before him, glass and steel, and the weight of too many impossible stories. Alexander parked in the visitor lot and sat for 5 minutes, staring at the building that contained answers to questions he hadn't known to ask. Then he stepped out of the car and walked toward the automatic doors, toward room 437, toward the woman who'd vanished and the child who'd never had the chance to disappear. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt like descending into water, pressure building with each floor. The pediatric wing was painted in cheerful colors that felt obscene given the circumstances. Room 437 sat at the end of a long corridor, its doors slightly ajar. Alexander stood outside for a full minute, his hand raised to knock, frozen by the enormity of what waited on the other side. Everything he thought he knew about his life was about to shatter. Everything he'd built, everything he'd become, all of it suddenly felt as substantial as smoke. He knocked. Soft, tentative. Not the confident rap of a CEO used to commanding rooms. Come in. Emma's voice, still familiar after 5 years. Still carrying that particular cadence that had first drawn him in at a medical ethics conference where she'd challenged his entire presentation with questions that cut straight to uncomfortable truths. Alexander pushed open the door and stepped into the room. And there she was. Emma Loron, looking nothing like the woman he remembered. Thinner, harder, with lines around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and impossible choices. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore faded jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. But it was her eyes that stopped him. Those eyes that had once looked at him with warmth now held only careful assessment, measuring him against some internal standard he suspected he'd already failed. Alexander. She didn't stand, didn't offer her hand. Just said his name like it was a fact she had to acknowledge. Emma. He managed to keep his voice steady. Then his eyes moved to the small figure in the hospital bed. Lily. His daughter. The child he hadn't known existed until 30 minutes ago. She was tiny, fragile in a way that made his chest ache. Her face was pale beneath the colorful headscarf, but even in sleep, he could see familiar features. The shape of her nose, the set of her jaw, his mother's cheekbones. His daughter. The room tilted again. Alexander grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself, his carefully constructed composure crumbling like sand. She looks like you, Emma said quietly. Acts like you too. Too smart for her own good. Asks questions that shouldn't fit in a 4-year-old brain. Alexander couldn't speak, couldn't process, could only stare at this small person who shared his DNA, who was dying because of genetics they'd both passed down without knowing. How long? His voice came out rough. We have weeks. Maybe a month if we're lucky. Emma's clinical tone cracked slightly. The preliminary chemotherapy bought us time, but without a transplant, the leukemia will kill her. Weeks. 1 month. Numbers that had always meant quarterly projections and board meetings now meant the difference between his daughter's life and death. I'll get tested. The words came automatically. Today. Now. Whatever needs to happen. Emma nodded, like she'd expected nothing less. Or maybe like she'd expected him to refuse, and was surprised by his immediate agreement. He couldn't read her anymore, if he ever really could. Dr. Okonkwo will explain the process. She's Lily's hematologist. She'll be here soon. Emma paused, then added softly, "Thank you for coming." The gratitude felt like an indictment. Thank you for coming to meet the daughter you didn't know existed. Thank you for showing up when her life depends on it. Thank you for doing the bare minimum of human decency. Why didn't you tell me? The question escaped before he could stop it. 5 years, Emma. 5 years. Her expression hardened. Not here. Not now. She glanced at Lily, still sleeping. There are things you don't understand. Things that made me leave. But right now, the only thing that matters is her. Alexander wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, wanted to rage at the unfairness of discovering fatherhood and potential loss in the same breath. But Emma was right. Nothing else mattered except the child in that bed. So he pulled up a chair and sat down across from Emma, separated by the hospital bed that contained his daughter, and waited for the doctor who would tell him whether he could save a life he'd just learned existed. The monitors beeped. The city hummed beyond the windows. And Alexander Whitmore began to understand that everything he thought he knew about his life had been a carefully constructed lie. The truth was sleeping in a hospital bed, wearing a butterfly headscarf, fighting a battle she shouldn't have to fight alone. He reached out slowly and touched Lily's small hand where it rested on the blanket. Her fingers were so tiny, so fragile. She didn't wake, but something in her expression softened slightly, like even in sleep she sensed she wasn't alone anymore. "I'm here," Alexander whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to his daughter or trying to convince himself. "I'm here now." Across the bed, Emma watched this interaction with unreadable eyes. 5 years of secrets sat between them like a minefield. 5 years of questions that needed answers. 5 years of a child growing up without a father because her mother had chosen disappearance over truth. But for now, in this moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the small hand beneath Alexander's fingers, the steady beep of monitors, and the impossible task ahead. Save her. Nothing else. Just save her. The door opened, and a tall woman in a white coat entered, her expression professional but kind. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, according to her badge. She looked at Alexander with the particular assessment of someone who'd seen too many absent parents suddenly show up when it was convenient. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, her Nigerian accent adding weight to each word. "I'm glad you came. We have a lot to discuss." Alexander stood, straightening his shoulders, trying to find the confidence that served him in boardrooms. But here, In this pediatric oncology ward, with his daughter's life hanging in the balance, all his CEO authority meant nothing. He was just a father, one who'd shown up 5 years too late, but was here now. It would have to be enough. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo's office was small but meticulously organized, every surface reflecting a mind that valued precision. Alexander sat across from her while Emma remained in Lily's room, maintaining the vigil she'd apparently kept for weeks. The compatibility testing will take 24 hours for preliminary results, Dr. Okonkwo explained, her dark eyes studying Alexander with unconcealed skepticism. Blood work, genetic markers, tissue typing. If you're a match, we proceed to more extensive evaluation. And if I'm not? Alexander asked, though something in his gut already knew the answer. Then we explore the National Registry, though finding a match for someone with Lily's specific genetic profile is extremely unlikely. She paused deliberately. Time is not our friend here, Mr. Whitmore. Alexander nodded, absorbing information that felt both clinical and devastating. What are her chances? With a compatible transplant from a biological parent? 70 to 80% survival rate. Without, Dr. Okonkwo's expression softened slightly. Let's focus on getting you tested. 20 minutes later, Alexander walked back toward room 437, his arms sore from blood draws. Through the partially open door, he heard a small voice, young and fragile. Mama, who was that man? Alexander froze in the hallway. Someone who might help you feel better, sweetheart. Emma's voice carried forced lightness. Is he a doctor like Dr. Sarah? A pause. No, baby. He's someone who cares about you. Alexander pushed open the door. Lily was awake now, propped against pillows, her dark eyes. His eyes, watching him with uncomplicated curiosity. Up close, awake, the resemblance was undeniable. She had his mother's cheekbones, his own stubborn chin, Emma's gentle mouth. Hi, Lily said simply. I'm Lily. I'm 4 3/4. Something cracked inside Alexander's chest. Hi, Lily. I'm Alexander. That's a grown-up name. She considered this seriously. Do you have a kid name too? Despite everything, Alexander almost smiled. My mom calls me Alex sometimes. I like that better. Lily shifted slightly, wincing. Emma was immediately at her side, adjusting pillows with practiced efficiency. Mama says you're going to help me not be tired anymore. I'm going to try. Alexander moved closer, unsure of protocol, unsure of everything. Can I sit down? Lily nodded solemnly, as if granting permission to a visiting dignitary. Alexander pulled the chair closer to her bedside, acutely aware of Emma's watchful presence. I made a drawing, Lily announced, reaching for a sketch pad on her bedside table. Her small hands trembled slightly with the effort. Want to see? I'd love to. She held up the page. It showed a crude but recognizable hospital room, stick figures representing herself and Emma, and surprisingly detailed butterflies covering the ceiling. Mama says butterflies mean hope. So I put lots. Alexander stared at the drawing, at this child who faced death with crayons and hope, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. This wasn't abstract anymore. This was real. She was real. It's beautiful, Alexander whispered. You can have it if you want, Lily said, offering her drawing. Thank you, he replied, holding it like a treasure. Emma watched, unreadable, pain, regret, exhaustion. The moment broke when Dr. Okonkwo entered. Mr. Whitmore, I need your signature. Ms. Laurent, a word in private? Emma left. Alexander sat with Lily in silence until he asked, Do you like stories? She nodded. Mama reads every night. My favorite is The Ugly Duckling. She says sometimes bad things turn good. Alexander swallowed hard. That's a good story. Will you read to me sometime? Yes, he promised. Through the door, he overheard Emma tell Dr. Okonkwo something that made the doctor gasp. Secrets waited to explode. Lily drifted into sleep, her drawing pad sliding from her fingers. His phone buzzed Elena. He ignored it. Work could wait. At dawn, Dr. Okonkwo called. Alexander was a perfect donor match. Relief and dread mingled. 2 weeks, maybe, to save his daughter. Elena stirred beside him, suspicious. He lied. Work. That evening he met Emma. She looked worn down. You're a match, she said. I know. Thank you. She's my daughter. His tone was sharp. 5 years ago, you didn't know she existed, because I made sure you didn't. Why? He demanded. Before she could answer, Rutledge called. Alexander picked up, reflexively. Emma's expression froze, cold as the day she left him. She slid a flash drive across the table. This is why. Nurexol trial data. 17 deaths buried by Chen-Meridian. Emails, memos, cover-ups. I was pregnant when I found it. If they knew, Lily and I were leverage. He denied it weakly. I would have known. Would you? Or were you too busy climbing Rutledge's ladder? That night Alexander opened the files. Memos, redactions, patient deaths, his own signature on tainted submissions. His empire crumbled before his eyes. At the office, Rutledge smiled over coffee. Nurexol is a success story. Your success. Alexander asked about the deaths. Rutledge's smile thinned. Every trial has complications. Don't let conspiracy theories distract you. His voice turned warning. I hear you're distracted personally. Dangerous in our business. Soon after, Alexander received a text from Detective Maria Torres. When you're ready to talk about Chen-Meridian, call me. And from Emma. Did you look at the files? He answered, yes. Her reply, now do you see why I ran? He did. The next day, Chen-Meridian's counsel, Kenneth Park, delivered an offer. Lifetime medical care for Lily, housing, a trust. If Alexander signed an NDA and withdrew after the transplant. They're buying your silence, Park admitted. And Emma's safety. If she goes public, they'll prosecute her for corporate espionage. Emma got the same threat. Furious, she called him. They said I'd lose Lily to prison. I know, he said. They're boxing us in. Grace Whitmore, Alexander's mother, arrived unannounced. He confessed everything. Her fury was quiet. Your father died because we couldn't afford his medication. You were supposed to change that, not bury people for profit. At the hospital, she met Lily with dumplings and warmth. Blood recognized blood instantly. In the hallway she told them, that child deserves better than lawyers deciding her fate. What are you going to do? Emma, I'm tired of running. Alexander, then we fight back. Together. During the transplant, Alexander endured the marrow harvest, while Lily received his cells through and for, life delivered like any other infusion. Grace sat with Emma, binding their grief and hope. I saw my son again yesterday, she said softly. Alexander awoke groggy, Grace by his side. She's stable, she reassured. Elena visited briefly, leaving in 7 minutes. Grace's disappointment was plain. That evening, Rutledge appeared, all charm and veiled threat. But Alexander already knew. The lines were drawn. His empire was ash. His daughter was everything. And the real war had just begun. How are you feeling? Like someone drilled into my bones. Alexander tried to sit up, failed. What do you want, James? To remind you what matters. Family, yes. But also legacy. Everything we built together. Rutledge's smile was paternal, predatory. Don't let emotion make you forget what's at stake. 17 people are dead. That's what's at stake. Rutledge's expression hardened. Careful, Alexander. You're vulnerable right now. Physically, legally. So is Ms. Laurent. So is your daughter. Vulnerability requires protection. The threat was naked now, undisguised. After he left, Alexander buzzed for a nurse. I want to see my daughter. They wheeled him to Lily's room. She was awake, pale but smiling when she saw him. They'd placed their beds side by side. 2 patients recovering from the same battle. Hi, Daddy. The word was new, tentative, perfect. Alexander's throat closed. Hi, sweetheart. Lily reached across the space between beds. Alexander took her small hand in his bandaged one. Emma watched from the corner, Grace beside her, and something shifted in the room's gravity. This was family. Broken, improvised, held together by medical intervention and desperate choices. But family nonetheless. Outside, Rutledge made phone calls. Elena packed Alexander's things from their shared penthouse. Detective Torres updated her case files. The machinery of consequence was already turning. Day 3 brought crisis. Lily's temperature spiked at 4 a.m., and her small body began rejecting the transplant. Graft versus host disease, Dr. Okonkwo explained grimly, the donor cells attacking Lily's organs. Emma found Alexander in the hallway at 2 a.m., both unable to sleep while their daughter fought battles they couldn't see. They sat on the floor outside Lily's ICU room, backs against cold walls, exhausted beyond words. I'm sorry, Alexander finally said. For not questioning enough. For not seeing what was happening. I'm sorry too. For running instead of fighting. For keeping her from you. Emma's voice cracked. What if I stole her only chance? You kept her safe? That's what parents do. They sat in silence. Then Emma asked, what happens after? If she survives, if we expose Chen-Meridian, what happens to us? I don't know, but we figure it out together. Dr. Okonkwo appeared, exhausted. The new immunosuppression protocol is showing effect. She's stabilizing. Relief crashed through them both like a physical force. Morning brought Detective Torres to the hospital entrance. She intercepted Alexander before he could re-enter. Mr. Whitmore, I think we need to talk. Torres laid out her investigation. 2 years of work, 17 deaths confirmed, possibly more. Chen-Meridian's systematic cover-up. The evidence she still needed. I know Ms. Laurent has files. I know you've seen them. Torres's gaze was steady. Testify. Both of you. We'll protect your family. Protection from whom? James Rutledge has significant reach. Legal, political, media. If you go public without federal protection, he'll destroy you. Torres leaned forward. But if you stay silent, the truth comes out eventually anyway. Just Messier. More dangerous. Alexander looked back at the hospital. How long do I have? Until your daughter recovers. Then decide. Torres handed him a card. But decide fast. Rutledge already knows I'm here. She was right. By noon, Alexander's phone lit up. We should talk. Alone. JR. That evening, Lily woke enough to ask questions. Why does everyone look sad? Emma smoothed her hair. Because we love you very much, baby. I love you too, Mama. And Daddy. And Grandma Grace. Lily's voice was thin but certain. We're a family now, right? Yes, sweetheart. We're a family. Alexander watched his daughter drift back to sleep and thought about Torres's folder, still unopened in his pocket. The families of the dead. The weight of collective suffering. Grace appeared beside him. You know what you have to do. It'll cost everything. Some things are worth the cost. As Torres had predicted, Rutledge sent another text. Last chance, Alexander. Choose wisely. Alexander looked at his daughter, his mother, Emma keeping vigil. His family, cobbled together from secrets and crisis, but real in ways his carefully constructed life never was. He opened Torres's folder and saw 17 faces staring back. A young mother, an elderly veteran, a teenager with his whole life ahead. People who'd trusted Chen-Meridian, who'd trusted him. Alexander pulled out his phone and typed, I'm ready to talk. All of it. Torres's response came immediately. Tomorrow. Bring everything. Lily stabilized over the next week, strong enough to notice tensions crackling between adults. She asked questions in that direct way children have. Why is everyone whispering? Alexander met Rutledge at the university club, mahogany, and old money. His former mentor wore confidence like armor. You're making a mistake, Alexander. By saving my daughter? By believing Emma Lawrence's paranoid conspiracy theories. Rutledge sipped scotch. I know about Torres. I know about your late-night meetings. I know you're considering throwing away everything we built. You buried 17 deaths. I managed complications in service of life-saving medication that's helped thousands. Rutledge leaned forward. You want to be the hero? Fine. But understand what happens. Emma faces corporate espionage charges. You lose everything. And Lily? Courts don't look kindly on unstable parents. Elena's already documented your erratic behavior. Alexander's blood went cold. You involved Elena? Elena involved herself. She's a survivor, Alexander. Unlike you, she understands how the world actually works. Rutledge slid papers across the table. Elena's affidavits about your mental state. Her testimony would be devastating in a custody hearing. The trap was complete. Fight back. Lose his daughter legally. Stay silent. Betray 17 families. Meanwhile, Kenneth Park met Emma at a diner far from Chen-Meridian's orbit. I shouldn't be here, Park said, but he stayed anyway. I have 3 kids. Every night, I think about the families from the Nurexol trials. Their kids. Then help us. Park pulled out a USB drive. Internal documents Rutledge doesn't know I copied. Testimony protocols that protect whistleblowers. Media contacts I trust. He paused. If you do this right, with federal coordination, you can expose the truth without destroying everyone in the blast radius. Why are you helping? Because I want to sleep at night again. That evening, Grace found Alexander on his penthouse balcony, staring at city lights. Your father would be ashamed of the empire you built on suffering, Grace said quietly. But he'd be proud of the father you're becoming. Mom, If I do this, I lose everything. You lose things. There's a difference. Grace stood beside him. That little girl in the hospital? Emma? Me? We're not things. We're what actually matters. Elena returned to pack, efficient and cold. I can't be part of this, Alexander. Whatever you're planning, I won't go down with you. I never asked you to. No, you never asked me anything real. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, I hope your daughter survives. But I hope you understand what choosing her costs. After she left, Alexander called Emma. I'm going to testify. Tell Torres everything. And I'm going to lose everything except what actually matters. Emma's voice was steady. Then we do this together. Grace, listening, nodded approval. Outside, the city glittered with false promises. Inside, Alexander Whitmore finally chose truth over empire. The federal building was granite and consequence. Alexander sat across from prosecutors. Kenneth Park's documents spread before him and confessed everything. His ignorance, his willful blindness, Rutledge's systematic cover-up. I signed approval documents without reading them completely. I trusted my mentor instead of verifying the data. 17 people died because I chose convenience over diligence. The video recording captured every word. Torres coordinated with federal press offices, timing the release precisely. Emma gave her testimony next, hands shaking but voice steady, describing how she discovered the buried deaths while pregnant and terrified. Dr. Okonkwo provided medical testimony, linking Nurexol's suppressed side effects to patient deaths, her own lost patient finally given voice. The story broke at 6 p.m. Alexander's face flooded every screen, his confession playing on loop. Chen-Meridian Pharma buried data that cost lives. I was complicit through negligence. James Rutledge orchestrated systematic fraud. Chen-Meridian's response was immediate. Rutledge appeared on financial news, charming and wounded. Alexander Whitmore has fabricated evidence to cover his own malfeasance. He's mentally unstable, obsessed with a woman who's manipulated him. Elena's tabloid interview dropped simultaneously. I tried to help him, but he was consumed by paranoia and obsession. Social media exploded. Opinions split viciously. Whistleblower versus scapegoat, hero versus villain. Federal agents raided Chen-Meridian headquarters while cameras rolled. Boxes of documents, seized servers, Rutledge escorted out in handcuffs, still smiling. Alexander's assets froze. His penthouse seized. The company he'd built crumbled in real time. At the hospital, Emma watched coverage with conflicted emotions. Grace stood beside Alexander during his press conference, silent solidarity, choosing her son's integrity over his success. Lily, improving daily, asked from her bed, "Why are people talking about Daddy on TV?" "Because sometimes doing the right thing is loud, baby." Families of Nurexol victims began coming forward, faces replacing statistics. A widow, a father, a young man who'd survived, but barely. Torres's case solidified with each new testimony. Park, now disbarred for his leak but unrepentant, worked with whistleblower protection nonprofits. That night, Alexander visited Lily's room to find her awake, coloring. "Mama says you're a hero." Alexander sat beside her bed. "I don't feel like one." Heroes never do in stories. They just do what's right even when it's scary. Lily handed him a drawing, a stick figure with a cape labeled Daddy. "I made this for you." Alexander held the picture, this child's uncomplicated faith, and felt something break and heal simultaneously. Grace appeared with dinner she'd cooked in the hospital's family kitchen. "You're staying with me until this settles. Both of you," she said, including Emma. Emma started to protest, but Grace cut her off. "Family takes care of family. You're family now." Outside, the media circus continued. But inside room 437, something quieter happened. Grace taught Lily a lullaby. Emma and Alexander sat together, not touching but present. The empire had fallen. The truth had cost everything. But Lily was healing. And that was enough. 3 months later, Alexander stood in Grace's kitchen making breakfast while Lily colored at the table. The apartment in Queens was nothing like his former penthouse, but it was full of life in ways marble and glass never were. Federal charges against Rutledge proceeded. Chen-Meridian dissolved, assets liquidated for victim compensation. Alexander was cleared criminally, but remained entangled in civil suits that would take years. His new job as a medical ethics consultant paid a fraction of his former salary. He testified before congressional committees, helped draft new FDA oversight protocols, used his insider knowledge to dismantle the systems he'd once served. Emma's investigative series on pharmaceutical corruption ran in a major outlet, her journalism career reborn from ashes. She worked from the corner of Grace's living room, Lily coloring beside her. Dr. Okonkwo remained Lily's physician, now also a family friend. Torres had closed her case with multiple indictments, her task force expanding to investigate other pharmaceutical companies. Kenneth Park, disbarred but unburdened, worked with nonprofits protecting whistleblowers, finding purpose in redemption. Today was Lily's 5th birthday. The apartment filled with people who'd shown up, Grace, Dr. Okonkwo, even Torres bearing an awkward but heartfelt gift. No luxury, no pretense, just presence. Lily blew out candles on Grace's homemade cake, her hair growing back soft and dark, her eyes bright with health impossible 3 months ago. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Emma said. Lily closed her eyes, whispered something inaudible, then opened them with satisfaction. "Okay, now story time." Alexander picked her up, carried her to the small bedroom she shared with Emma, and read her favorite book about transformation and hope. Later, after Lily slept, Alexander and Emma sat on the fire escape, watching the city glow. "What do you wish you could tell yourself a year ago?" Emma asked. Alexander thought about the CEO who'd measured worth in quarterly reports, who'd trusted systems without questioning, who'd missed 5 years with his daughter. That everything built on lies collapses. But things built on truth, even small things, even hard things, those last. Emma took his hand. Not romance, but partnership forged through crisis and choice. "We made it," she whispered. Inside, Grace hummed while cleaning up. Lily slept surrounded by drawings of butterflies and families, and 2 people who'd found each other again through impossible circumstances sat together watching their city and finally feeling home. The legal battles would continue. The rebuilding would take years. But Alexander had traded empire for integrity, wealth for presence, and discovered what he should have known all along. Love wasn't measured in assets. It was measured in showing up, again and again, even when everything else was gone. Lily was alive. That was everything. The rest was just details. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.